Power on.
Earth, 2018. The alliance between governments and tech giants has led to the rise of the surveillance society, distraction technology, the attention wars, and the erosion of your mind. But one show stands against this insidious system. Hosted by the podcast champion, the man of tomorrow, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He and his co-hosts form the intellectual resistance. It's time for Sovryn Tech.
You're dressing all in black, from your front to your back, and all your evil ways, they seem to go on for days, and as a matter of fact, you got one. Smash it up, burn it down, tearing up the underground. You wanna live like a super villain, back in the lineup before your time's up. You wanna live like a super villain. Alright. You've been knocking down these doors, you've been filling up this room. You run around the place like your name was Dr. Doom. You're a killer of culture, a vulture of style, and it won't be that long before you end up on trial. You're gonna smash it up, burn it down, tearing up the underground. You wanna live like a super villain, back in the lineup before your time's up. You wanna live like a super villain.
Woo! Just like they said in Ghostbusters 2, baby, when the Titanic showed up at the dock. Well, better late than never. The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Sabzu, the rated R radio star, the thriller that is Sobzilla, baby, here for you for another Little Sovryn Tech. And, well, actually, speaking of Little Sovryn Tech, not that little ever gets attributed to me much, but speaking of Little Sovryn Tech, little shop talk here in the beginning. Going forward, and this was a decision I made with a heavy heart. Going forward with Sovryn Tech, it wasn't that heavy of a heart. And this is something I discussed with the Sovryn Tech patrons, who I consider to be executive producers of the show. I care very much about what they think. I put the vote to them. I literally made a poll on Patreon that they were able to take part in. And I asked them, because they are financially invested in the show, if you wish to be, you can go to sovereigntech.com, become a patron yourself, get access to thousands of hours of content, and you might want to, because what I asked them about, I said, look, I've looked over some data, I've been doing some research on this, and, some other things going on. What do you think if we cut Sovryn Tech back down, and I say back down, to 1 hour per week instead of the 2 hours? Now, the reason I say back down is because actually 6 or 7 years ago when this show started, this would have been 2012, this show was only, in fact, it wasn't even an hour originally. But then I kind of decided, okay, let's do an hour. Let's bring it up to an hour. And then after a few months, then I was like, you know what? There's just so much hotness going on. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself, but let's take it to 2 hours. Let's just go all the way. Okay. And, we've been doing that for years, for at least 5 or so years of Sovryn Tech's history. I have been doing 2 hours a week, every single week, never missing an episode, in that time frame. So the question came up, or the thought came up, that, to try and bring in, we're doing around 15,000 strong listeners every single week on Sovryn Tech, and I'm honored that you're here. I think that it would make sense to get even more listeners on board. Here's the thing, is that I think some people see a 2 hour long podcast, okay, and that is initially intimidating to them. They're like, whoa, I don't have 2 hours of my day to put into a podcast. And not everybody listens to things at like 2.3x like I do, not, in their podcast app. I recognize that, to where I could listen to 2 hours in under an hour. And look, some people, it's just too much. It's like, I can't invest into that. And I've heard that over the years, actually, many times. Kind of anecdotally, but I've heard that from many people. Like, whoa, you do 2 hours a week? I can't get on board with that. So, maybe that's just them saying they really don't want to listen to my show, which, hey, fuck, if you don't, you don't. It's not everybody's brand, and that's okay. But regardless, I want to try this out. I want to see, let's shave it down to an hour and let's see how people feel, how they react to it, if more people are willing to put the time into it. Also, I think a lot of people, even longtime listeners, are like, okay, I can't do 2 hours anymore. I've got other stuff that I'm listening to or whatever. And so even to bring them back, bring listeners from the past back into the fold, which I would love to do. Let's try this out. So after this week, you're getting 2 hours this week, no problem. Okay. After this week, though, we're going to cut it down to 1 hour. I'll leave it as a bit of a surprise what that's going to take shape as. There's still going to be segments. As far as what segments, that'll be part of the surprise. Will the segments change up every once in a while? Either way, no matter how I go about this, at some point, the segments will change up. If it's every 6 months, like I've been doing for years, or if it's week to week, the segments change. We'll see how it feels. But this is going to be very experimental, and I am open to all of your feedback on the matter. But as far as the tough decisions, I really leave that to the patrons, to the executive producers, and I just I love to get your thoughts. So, but I do want to hear from you as well. If you think that this is crazy, and for whatever reason you're not a patron, you can still talk to me. Tell me, email me bbs@sovryntech.com. Give me the hookup, whatever. But regardless, that is going forward. So again, this episode, as you can see, is 2 hours. Next week, if suddenly you see, that oh shit, why is this file half the size, or why is there only an hour here? Did my podcast app fuck up downloading Sovryn Tech? No, we're shifting gears on this. But again, if you want to, now if you're a person that loves getting 2 hours of the Golden Stallion every week, and hey. You're in 15,000 company, baby. But if you're that person and you really still want 2 hours of me, well, I got a great proposition for you. You can become a patron. Just go to sovryntech.com and you can sign up to become a patron. You can do $1 a month. If you want to get access to some other podcasts and some other content, you got to go a little higher. But there's literally, every single month, there's hours upon hours. And now, as far as the back catalog, there's thousands of hours that just for $1 a month that you get access to. In fact, this Sunday, we're going to have our usual live Q&A hangout that we do, where I interact live directly on video with Sovryn Tech listeners. You can be a part of that for just $1 a month. So if you want more Sovryn Tech, if 1 hour is just not going to cut it for you, I've got your solution. Become a patron. Just go to sovryntech.com to do that. Anyway, that's enough of the shop talk. We've got plenty to talk about in this episode, including a fun review. An interesting review, I think, a movie review that we'll do later on in the episode. But we got plenty of tech to talk about before that. Plenty of tech to get into. And let's get into it. This is not going to come as a surprise at all to Sovryn Tech listeners, because we've been keeping track of this for a while. In fact, I got a website that I'm going to put in the show notes that you can find if you want to keep track of this shit too. But it looks like we're losing another Google service. What a surprise. Boy, don't ever base your fucking company on on anything they're offering you. I just mentioned the Q&A hangout that we do for Patreon. Look, if they actually, all right, so here's the thing. They're getting rid of Hangouts. We have to explain what that means. If Google was really getting rid of the video Hangouts, or what is kind of video Hangouts / YouTube Live, there's alternatives, and I would run to them. And it doesn't really affect me, because the only way you connect with me is I just send you the link of where to go. Okay, and so if that link goes to, instead of Hangouts, it goes to, Jitsi or something, then that's where it goes. I'm not saying I'd use that. I'm just giving an example. Okay, so this doesn't really affect me, but if you are really relying upon any kind of Google platform, I don't know how many more times you got to learn this lesson, because, again, add one to the cemetery here at Google. Hangouts is going the way of the dodo. Now, understand that, holy fucking piss, that... you say Google, and if you have an Android phone, the thing just goes goddamn nuts. I know you can turn that off, but when you're trying to run stock because you're writing a book about how to fucking use an Android phone, I'd say, hey, Google, oh, shit, now I said it, and it opened back up again. But these guys are fucking nuts. All right, look, here's the thing. So they're canceling Hangouts. Let me explain what that means quickly. They are canceling more really the chat app that also has kind of the built-in video thing. They are not canceling like Hangouts that you use for meetings. Of course, they split back in 2017. They said they were going to do this anyway. They split Hangouts into Hangout Chat and Hangout Meet. Hangout Chat is kind of similar to Duo in a way, and then Hangout. I mean, it's so fucking convoluted because it's fucking Google. Okay, and it's no wonder they're like, well, we have to keep killing off these services because nobody's using them because nobody knows which one to fucking use. You goddamned idiots. Anyway, the point I wanted to get to, of course, you know, we're also putting to sleep, we're putting to rest George H.W. Bush. Well, no. We're putting to rest Google Plus this year in 2018, finally. And, you know, here's the rub. I've mentioned this so many times. Sergey Brin, he came out years ago when they knew that Google Plus wasn't working. Well, I mean, it took them way too long to admit this. It took them way too long to end it. But here's the thing with Google, okay? And I think this should bring all of you pause if you're using Google minus YouTube. Because YouTube is technically a separate company, even though it's all Alphabet, right? It's just the umbrella corporation. You know, I mean, you're just waiting for the T-virus to come out. Oh, sorry. This should bring you pause. If you are using any kind of communications or whatever with Google, okay? Sergey Brin, years ago, when talking about Google Plus and why it wasn't meeting expectations, he said, you know what? I don't know a damn thing about human sociability. I don't know how to talk to other people. I have no idea. I had no business. Sergey Brin, co-founder, Google. I had no business making a social platform because I don't even know how to socialize. Bingo. Such incredible honesty, which is a rarity out of the tech giants. Okay, but there it is. Google's pretty much admitting to, I mean, that was Google admitting, hey, you know, we actually don't know how to do like social because we don't know how to actually talk. We don't know how to be human beings. Okay, so, you know, I mean, that should just tell you, don't rely on any other chat apps whatsoever. I think the smartest thing that they've done is they've just decided to concentrate on creating a really quote unquote great SMS clients as far as SMS goes. Okay. And have that with the web portal and all that. Obviously that's the direction they're going. I mean, this shouldn't surprise anybody. Now, you know, there was a big hullabaloo around this, and then they came out and said, no, we don't, you know, they said it's going to be killed, or the report, I think, was from 9to5 Google, who said Hangouts is going to be killed by 2020. Of course, they leave that vague. They don't tell you what, like, you know, which version of Hangouts we're talking about. There shouldn't even be multiple versions, but whatever there is, they didn't tell you which one. And so a lot of people are thinking, oh, how am I going to do my video chats? How am I going to do this? You don't need it. You don't need it. And Google has already said that this was going to happen. But they did make clear, a spokesperson at Google finally came out after all the hullabaloo. And in fact, might have even used the word hullabaloo. But he finally came out and just said, you know, look, we're going to just get everybody transferred over to Hangout Meet and Hangout Chat. And until they do that, we're not going to shut down Hangouts. So they're saying, okay, we don't have a definite timeline, but yes, this is exactly what we're fucking going to do. This shouldn't surprise anybody. But again, I would not count on, moral of the story here, I wouldn't count on Google for anything. But for damn sure, don't count on them. I mean, yeah, Gmail, whatever, but don't count on them for like any kind of instant messaging or anything like that. Just don't. They're going to shut it down. I mean, they shut down Allo. So the website actually that I wanted to share with you is Killed by Google. It's killedbygoogle.com. And this website gives you like a breakdown of, I think, over 100 services that Google has shut down in like the past decade and the reasons why they did it. It's very granular. It's an interesting thing to look at. And I think it's important to recognize this, that you, especially things that you don't pay for this shit to get shut down on you, I mean, just expect it, you know? I mean, they don't care. And it's funny because what Google will say when you go through a lot of these, will say, well, there's lack of use. And it's like, well, yeah, but your definition of what a good user base is wildly different from what the individual expects when he gets online, right? I mean, the one person who loves, I don't know, Allo, or the few 5 or 10 people that love Allo, you know, they love it, but they don't generally understand that to use Allo, for that to be free and available and to make sense, you have to have millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people using it. Okay. So to say, and because some some people at Google had come out kind of in defense of this decision. For them to come out and say that, oh no, we care about what people want. No, not really. You can't actually, I guess you can care about what people want in the plural, but you literally have to only care about what millions of people want. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile to you. But that doesn't exactly make sense because, we're all individuals. We all have different tastes in what we want. And this just runs into all kinds of problems, and it shows a lot of flaws in the business model that is Silicon Valley. Okay? I'm not saying everybody in Silicon Valley thinks this way, but this is a very real problem. And it's a problem that didn't have to be. It's interesting. In fact, when I was looking through the Killed by Google, website to look at all the services, one of the more interesting ones that they mentioned was the Google Desk Bar, which I remember this. This is back like when Windows XP was, the juggernaut of its day. And you would install this, and it would give you a little search engine in the taskbar on Windows, and it would also give you like those, what did they call those things? It gave you little widgets, right, of course, just like the ones you have on your phone. It gave you widgets on your sidebar and everything, which then Windows Vista would actually implement, but Google Desk Bar was giving you that ability. You could put a clock, weather, all this different stuff on it. It was actually kind of cool, other than the fact it was Google. But this is before Windows had a really great granular search built into the operating system itself as well, because this could also search your desktop. It's Google, so that should be creepy, but regardless, I remember this. Okay, and here's the rub, is that granted that was meant for, search online, most importantly, perhaps, but when you have software, when you're relying upon web services, but just when you have software, software, because people want to say, well, look, apps come and go, services come and go. This is the nature of the PC revolution. This is how things have always been. No, not really. Because when you bought software back in the day, you had that software forever. It was offline, it was done, and you can rock and roll it. Fuck, you can still run old versions of Adobe Photoshop, really old versions of it. Like decades old versions of it. No problem on Windows 10. Seriously. And this is the problem with everything going cloud, everything being online or whatever, is because, okay, so Adobe shuts down the servers for CS2, right, for Photoshop CS2. You can still use Photoshop CS2. In fact, now you don't even have to authenticate it anymore, so everybody can use CS2. That's great. Just for these companies to say that they're consumer facing, no, they're millions of consumer facing. They can't give a shit about the individual. They can't. And you can't say that. Here's the other rub, is that like to have to appeal to the masses or something like that. You're automatically not caring about the individual because, again, we are all just so damn different. Maybe some of us get tricked into thinking we want to be like everybody else, but no, you don't. We all have our own tastes, and, software, especially open source software, that's a beautiful thing, and probably why it's taken over the world, because it lets individuals tailor things. It lets them feel like it's theirs, and it lets them tailor it to how they want it. Fuck Google services. And some of this other stuff's depressing too on this site. Like they have Project Ara and Project Tango. Those are gone. Project Tango was all, that might be a good thing for privacy concerns because it was like 3D mapping an entire room. But Project Ara was that phone that had like switchable blocks and everything that I thought Google bought that out and then killed it. But we talked about it when they killed it, but it's been a couple years. I had forgotten about that. But so many great ideas that are just dead. And fuck them. And that's what I got. And unfortunately, my phone, whenever I say, hey, Google or okay, Google, it doesn't seem to transmit to them, fuck them. I really wish it would. Now, our next bit of news, something that Google actually does right is really interact well with YubiKeys, with, hardware second-factor authentication. And I've been recommending lately, everybody, if you do have a Google account, and most of us still do, regardless of the fact of whether or not we're using their services to whatever degree, that you should lock that account down because Google does offer a really great security service called the Advanced Protection Program, which is totally free. But it requires you to have a couple of YubiKeys or maybe Google's Titan key, whatever one you want to run with. As long as it's FIDO, you're usually pretty good. And Microsoft has now gotten in the game And I don't want to necessarily praise them, but, Google's doing it. Now Microsoft is getting in the game where you can use a YubiKey, a FIDO2 key specifically. Okay, it has to be the FIDO2 specification, which we talked about earlier this year. And you can get a FIDO2 key that's practically indestructible. You can get one of those for like $20. But you can get that, and then also it requires a PIN, but you can log into your Microsoft account with that. Now, it's not as hardened, shall we say, as Google's Advanced Protection Program, because with Google's Advanced Protection Program, you have to have the motherfucking YubiKey. Otherwise, if you lose both of them, and that's why they require you to have two, if you lose both of them, you're done. You're out. You're not getting into your account whatsoever. That's a good thing. You need to be personally responsible. Drives me insane every time somebody says, well, what if I lose it or whatever? Well, what do you do when you lose your keys for your car? Or whatever. I mean, don't you actually pay attention to shit and keep an eye on shit that actually matters? I don't know how these people go through their lives, but regardless of that, okay, you can now use, and I think this is great. Let's get towards, this is something we've been pushing for a while in Sovereign Tech, get towards using a secondary device to do your second factor authentication. Actual piece of hardware, a YubiKey, which is a little USB key, is a great way to do that. If you have a Microsoft account, the only thing is, I think you have to set it up through Edge. Like when I was setting it up, I couldn't get it to work on any other browser until I just set it up within Microsoft Edge, which kind of sucks, but I still think it's a great idea to have that set up, and hopefully it will get broader adoption for logging into your Microsoft account on other web browsers as FIDO2 becomes a more popular standard. It's already a standard. It just needs to become more popular. Or maybe we'll end up using something else in the near future. Here's looking at you, Squirrel. Love you, Steve Gibson. Anyway, but that's something. Go for it. I'll give a little bit of praise to Microsoft for that, but I'm not going to give them too much because when we get to our story of the week, you'll find out why. Anyway, another bit of news, and I think this is really fucking depressing. The online war on sex and eroticism continues, which we talked about with Google, how they're getting rid of the fan fiction tab because, oh shit, somebody got on the internet and they saw porn. Woo! Shut it all down. Well, Tumblr's shutting it all down. I was stunned by this. I used to use Tumblr way back in the day, back when Sovereign Tech was only an hour long. Okay. In fact, it was like it's what I did to create my main website. One of the things I loved about Tumblr was that it had a completely hands-off policy as far as, erotic content and pornography, visual especially. And now Tumblr is coming out. Now they're very specific in their language. Pretty much they're saying that if it's something Da Vinci drew or Michelangelo did or whatever and it has nipples, they'll let that slide. If you are writing erotica, that is okay. But if you're, kind of like some of these cosplay gals on Instagram or something, if you're Insta famous and you're Insta famous because you're practically showing your nipples or whatever, and you thought Tumblr was a place where you could be uncensored about it, or if you're doing some kind of sex acts on video, all of that is not okay, and they are going hardcore, not with porn, but with their algorithms to shut that shit down. This makes, in my opinion, Tumblr completely superfluous. There is no point to Tumblr existing if it cannot be the haven, which it has been traditionally, for erotic art. And that's exactly what it is. Or expressions of human love. And that's exactly what it fucking is. If it's other shit, well, then it's other shit. And you don't look at it. Okay. But I mean, anytime you go after pornography and you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The human race suffers from that, in my opinion, because it's Tumblr. Now, I mean, I tell you what, I would have felt better, and I know this is the low-hanging fruit, but really, I would have felt better if Tumblr said, and we're not going to allow any pictures or depictions of militarism any longer. We will not allow pictures of police on our platform. We will not, as long as you're going to get rid of all the violence while you're at it, be fucking consistent if you're concerned about what you think is traumatic things for people to see. Okay. Then at least you'd be consistent. But like every other platform, you're not. Twitter is still kind of a pretty open platform that lets you post just about anything you want. It's a matter of time before that goes away. They've been experimenting, I think, with algorithms that can finally put the kibosh on a lot of this stuff as it is, and sometimes it ends in high-profile cases where somebody's account gets shut down. but it's part of a longer game. And I think this is disappointing. I know the dangers of the kind of shit that can get put up on Tumblr, okay, or on a platform that is completely no holds barred, no rules, hands off. I understand. Don't worry, the user base will self-police. It really will. And especially if you had an open platform, they could really self-police, kind of like we were talking about last week about what can happen on the dark web, where they find out there's some servers that are serving up some genuinely sick shit that involves harming children. Well, there's there's hackers ready to shut you down, and damn right, shut them down. But this, no, Tumblr, you just became completely pointless and purposeless. Way to go. I'll be back with more.
Hey, look! Got an energy spike. Pull back! Launch. Now! Bombing the Narn back to the Stone Age wasn't enough for you?
Then we heard it. The sound of something terrible being born.
This is madness.
Station 3 to Commander Ivanova.
Centauri have launched a full-scale assault.
Time is come and gone! It's our turn now!
2 million tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. A world where empires rise and fall, where dreams are born and die, where war and hatred are challenged by love and faith. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity. It is our last, best hope for peace, for victory, for freedom. It is Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Story of the week.
It is time for Story of the Week. And I was just mentioning militarism. Well, and I mentioned how I don't want to congratulate Microsoft too much, moving the mic arm here. So if you hear a little, that's what's going on. Or you just heard me do that. Great. I saved your ears. Or maybe I traumatized them. I'm sorry. But talk about inflicting some trauma. Well, Microsoft. Story coming from Ars Technica here. This is our Story of the Week, and I want to read about it. Like I said, I'm not going to give them too much congratulations. And, speaking of pornography, pornography was definitely giving Tumblr its edge. If there's any reason, I think if there's any reason people are on Tumblr, I know that, 5-6 years ago, everybody was like, oh, Tumblr is Facebook 2.0, Tumblr is the future, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, that didn't happen for varying reasons. One could argue that that's because of pornography. I would argue the opposite, is that Tumblr only had a purpose because, again, it was so hands-off. But regardless of that, there's the argument that sex or pornography or eroticism, pick your terms, okay? They all fall within a certain Venn diagram, and some places go wackier than others. There's the argument that is part of what pushes technological innovation. I think that that's an accurate statement in many ways. Not all, but in many, many ways. I think that, yes, pornography certainly did, increase the adoption of, say, the internet, right, of the World Wide Web. However, what brought on the internet? Well, ARPANET, right, which was a military, a military project, which was designed to create a network that could survive nuclear fallout. So that's what the internet came out of. And yes, it did. Don't tell me, believe me, I wish it came out of the free market, but no, it did not. We need to be honest with ourselves about that. Okay. And did the free market, make it viable? Well, if you want to call pornography the free market, but then you better admit the importance of pornography. The other thing that really made the internet like something viable, honestly, was email ads. And you got to admit to that too. I mean, it's not sunshine and rainbows, okay, that brought the internet to life. And we should really accept that and appreciate that fact and maybe second guess its very existence. But let's be honest here that the military, maybe not as much as pornography, or maybe as much, or maybe more, does push forward technological innovation. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, as someone who is in the military and who is nothing less than ashamed of that fact. Okay, I recognize what that institution is, and I am not giving it any praise. I say this to warn you that any cool technology that you see up and coming, even ones that I might find to be interesting and cool, and that could have genuine use in either, entrepreneurship or to just have a good fucking time, or maybe to fuck, can be perverted, not into pornography, but into some form of militarism. And here's the story from Ars Technica. Microsoft wins $480 million military contract to bring HoloLens to the battlefield. $500 million. This is a huge contract in Silicon Valley. I know you're saying, yeah, but this company is paying $20 billion for this company and blah, blah, blah. Isn't this small potatoes? By no fucking means. Sure as fuck not for HoloLens, which how many people even have that? I mean, I know it's still like in dev kit, but you get my point. Reading on here by Peter Bright, here's the subheader. The contract should see the military buy more than 100,000 headsets. Now, that number may not seem like a lot, okay? And I understand why you feel that way. However, 100,000 headsets. The U.S. military is doing everything it can, and it has been doing this since I served in the U.S. military, okay? I even hate to use the word served. But when I was in the U.S. military, the attempt to put as few soldiers onto the battlefield and instead put some kind of drone technology, be it, aerial drones, ground drones of some kind, whatever, that has been the dream. And do you I'll just say this to you right now. Do you think HoloLens could be very useful for making that happen? The reason I say that is, and obviously the answer is yes, because we're talking about augmented reality, and the soldier is actually either making use of data from a drone or is actually controlling the drone from it. Okay, now, so 100,000 of these headsets, especially if the situation is that it's controlling, say, some kind of, remote killing machine, okay, and that's exactly what it is, that turns, one HoloLens headset potentially into a mini army in and of itself. So 100,000 headsets, yeah, that's pretty substantial for any division to be using these things. Okay, or however it's going to get shaken up. Let's read the story a bit here, and then I'll talk about it more. Microsoft has won a $480 million contract to develop an augmented reality system for use in combat and military training for the U.S. Army. So part of its training, yep, you can see where that application would be, but then be clear. It also says for use in combat. Reading on. Called Integrated Visual Augmentation System, or IVAS, formerly Heads-Up Display 3.0, was originally HUD 3.0. The goal of the project is to develop a headset that gives soldiers, both in training and in combat, an increase in, quote, this is an exact quote, lethality, mobility, and situational awareness, end quote. The ambitions for the project are high. Authorities want to develop a system with a goggle or visor form factor, nothing mounted on a helmet, with an integrated 3D display, digital cameras, ballistic laser, and hearing protection. The system should provide remote viewing of weapon sights to enable low-risk, rapid target acquisition, perform automated or assisted target acquisition, again, this is kind of all pointing at drones, integrate both thermal and night vision cameras, track soldier vitals such as heart and breathing rates, and detect concussions. Over the course of IVAS's development, the military will order an initial run of 2,550 prototypes with follow-on production possibly in excess of 100,000 devices. The military has already used HoloLens for training. Microsoft's current headset falls far short of the requirements. For a start, it's too bulky and offers an insufficient field of view, but it certainly serves as an important precursor technology. A new version of the headset is expected to be shown next year. Augmented reality startup Magic Leap is also reported to have bid as part of an attempt by the military to expand the range of contractors beyond the traditional military-industrial complex. Stallion breaking in for a second. First off, Magic Leap's technology, I don't even think really exists. Where the fuck is it already? Even though there's been that great minute demo video. Oh, that's all we've got for years. Okay, but who owns Magic Leap? Oh, Google, who's in a bunch of hot water with their own employees over their military contracts and playing ball with the Chinese government. Let's read on a little bit more here. The successful bid comes against a backdrop of employees being increasingly willing to speak out against customers against customers that they disapprove of, in this case, the military. In June this year, Microsoft staff penned an open letter imploring the company to end its contract with ICE, Due to widespread revulsion at ICE's family separation policy, Google similarly has seen substantial internal backlash over its plan to build a censored search engine for China, and earlier in the year, an image recognition system for the Department of Defense, which we talked about both. Microsoft also actually works on like a crime predictability engine. It sounds right out of Minority Report for the police. They happily work with that. So what's the moral of the story here? What's the deal? I want you to be aware that anytime you hear some idiot, some asshat, when you see Slapnuts over there to your left, say, "Oh man, I love Google. Oh, thank you, Google. Oh, Microsoft. Oh, the future you have given us. Oh, it's so beautiful." They are literally supporting the murder of children. These tech giants. Yes, they are. You have to keep it in perspective. And I've said this before, that if you made a heat map, maybe you could put on HoloLens, use the latest in Miltech for that. If you made a heat map of where government money falls, okay, and government equates to military, right? Because that's what government is, the monopoly use of force. We heard that from a president of the United States not too long ago, that's exactly what it is. If you put a heat map down on where government money is and say red meant government money, it would be red everywhere. You can't avoid it. That's a fact. You really can't avoid it. But what businesses sure as fuck can do is not go for the goddamn bid and say, "Oh, military, we would love for you to use our HoloLens." Yeah, I hate it. I hate it because, sometimes it does make you wonder about like the fact that, with video games, okay, I'm a serious gamer, okay, like I don't play fucking Battlefield or Call of Duty or any of that bullshit, okay, I can't do it. But as a gamer, for years, kind of what I've always told myself was that, when people say that, oh, well, I don't know, whatever, this Armed Forces game or Call of Duty or whatever, and well, Call of Duty, there's a whole other case to be made for that. It's trying to recruit kids into the military because the military recruiters literally show up at game releases at GameStops for these games because they know exactly who their audience is. Okay, so that's fucked up in and of itself. But I would always say to myself, well, okay, at least these companies aren't working with the military. Yeah, they're making games that are based around it, whatever. It's an epic story, blah, blah, blah. This is how we're taught entertainment has to be, and so you go with it. But there's a separation, right? It's kind of like church and state. It's games and state. There's a separation. No longer. And it feels a little ugly when... And this is what I think can really bring you pause. It feels a little ugly if in our future we're popping on HoloLens. And look, I've been excited about HoloLens in the past because I think there's genuinely amazing therapeutic and wonderful things that could be done with virtual reality. But when you put on your VR headset, and remember that demo that Panos did, that Panos Panay, or well, one of the ones that Panos is on, whatever, they were demoing how like this thing came out of the wall and you had like, when you had your HoloLens on, it looked like you had a, kind of a Mega Man style gun hand or something like that. And you started blasting that thing that was coming through the wall in augmented reality. I think it should bring you pause that same technology that is powering that game is the same thing that is literally assisting in the killing of actual human beings. I'm not saying you are responsible for that. I'm not saying you buying HoloLens is supporting the military industrial complex. I am saying think about that. Do a gut check. A real serious gut check and ask, hey, wait a minute. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not telling you, oh, don't use Microsoft's products. Oh, don't use Google's products. Don't do that. There's plenty of reasons to not do that. If you want your shit cracked into, or if you want to count on a service, obviously Google doesn't. I was going to crack a terrible joke about the Google not needing the military to take stuff to the graveyard, but that is a horrible joke. And, but you get my point, what we were talking about earlier. Okay. What I want you to get out of your head is any sense of praise for these companies or any idea that somehow they give a shit about the individual. I'm sorry, you can't support the military and then say in the same breath that you give a goddamned about human life. You can't. You can't say that you're an entrepreneur. You can't say that you're doing real business. You can't say you're any kind of free marketeer. You can't say any of that shit. If you if you at any point just to grease your fucking palms, because does Microsoft need another $500 million? The fuck they do. Okay, to grease your palms, you choose bullets over business instead of business over bullets. Fuck you. Don't tell me you give a damn about me or that you give a damn about people like Google did. And that was as simple as something as Hangouts. I'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech.
From Big Finish Productions, Blake 7, The Classic Audio Adventures.
I'm taking Liberator in on manual. We'll be in teleport range in 2 minutes.
What the hell was that?
Information. Liberator has been attacked.
You don't say.
Put up the force wall.
Confirm.
Message to all ground commanders. Initiate the final phase. Let's crush these rebels once and for all.
My name is Avon. Kerr Avon.
Kerr Avon.
Our hostage arrives. Which you may be unnecessary.
As a hostage, it's nice to be superfluous.
You can go to blake7.com to find more of the new adventures of one of science fiction's greatest masterpieces, Blake 7, at blake7.com.
Important messages.
It is time for Important Messages, where I answer the questions that get sent in to me through the various channels available. Of course, there's contact.zog.ninja. That's the old contact form that you can use. Or you can go to my main website, which is zog.email. You can just click at the Contact Us tab at the top and hit that. Or there's bbs@sovereigntech.com, which is my email address. Or you could still contact me on Twitter, I suppose. But anyway, this is one that came into me through the contact form, which is a nice way if you want to be anonymous about it. And maybe they wanted to be anonymous because they're afraid that if I knew their name, I'd give them a good chewing out. No, I would not. But let's read their question here. It's actually a great question. Even though he thinks I'm going to be mad at him or something, I assume it's a he anyway, but maybe not. So, hey Stallion, I imagine you're going to kill me for this, but I really love my phone and have been using it as my sole computing platform for a few years now. And inspired by you, I think I want to start my first podcast. It doesn't need to be anything too serious, but I would like some effects, music, and drops and things like that. But I also don't plan on it being very long, kind of like how your user podcast is only about 15 minutes. Okay, let me stop on some of this. Just reading the whole thing, going way too fast here. First off, I'm not going to kill you, okay? Whatever works for you. If you live that life, and where you can get away with your phone handles your business, does whatever you want. I mean, I'll admit sometimes, like if I'm traveling, I will just have my smartphone and I'll bring a Bluetooth keyboard. Like I'll just put a little Bluetooth keyboard in my bag. And if I need to write out a long email or something along those lines, I can do it, with that. Like, because a touchscreen keyboard is just still so shitty. I mean, they really are. Let's be honest about that. But no, I'm not going to kill you. You use the level of technology that works for you. Fine, whatever. Okay. And if you've been doing it for a few years, that's fucking incredible. So you're impressing the hell out of me, let me tell you. Because, the things I want to do, it's just not possible. So anyway, let's continue on. Or you said, and inspired by you want to start your first podcast. Hey, I think that's fantastic. Let's go with it. So now here's where things are going to get a little weird, though. Okay, first off, you don't want it to be long. If you're just using your phone, that's probably best. And you mentioned my user podcast. I'm glad you enjoyed that. You have to be a Sovryn Tech patron to get access to that. But I'm glad you enjoyed that. More episodes to come throughout December. Anyway. And yeah, I like to keep that short. Real quick on that. There is, and this is fitting upon what we were saying earlier in this episode. There's arguments for 2-hour long podcasts, there's arguments for 10-minute long podcasts. It kind of feels like a lot of the more, well, like the really successful podcasts are 2 hours long, like the really successful ones, you know, your Twits, your Joe Rogans, and so on. But everything else that gets kind of crazy numbers seems to fit more under like that or around that 20-minute range, you know, plus or minus 10 minutes. But all of that data, all those statistics, you know, could mean nothing. I mean, it's something that I have been looking into and I'm experimenting with because I think a podcast should evolve, you know, and I've always tried to keep Sovryn Tech evolving. It's why I switch out different segments and everything. And it sounds like you kind of want to do segments with this because you're saying you want music, effects, and some drops and all that. You know, honestly, that's the part where I'm not exactly sure how you're going to pull this off with a smartphone. Okay. There are some apps and it also depends on what you're using. Are you using iOS or are you using, are you using Android? Now, if you're using iOS, it actually becomes a lot more practical. And the reason is because iOS has GarageBand. And I mean, it's got to be a pain in the ass to do it on that little screen, but you really could. If you're using iOS, just rock GarageBand and you could upload it to, like, you could make a SoundCloud account and just upload it to SoundCloud and away you go. And with GarageBand, I think you could add in some of the effects that you want and so on. It really makes a great argument for iOS. But anyway, let me finish reading the question here. Do you have any thoughts on the best way to go about this? We started talking about that. Any add-on hardware or certain apps I should use? Thanks, and keep moving us towards the future. Woo! All right. Yeah. So again, it depends on what kind of. I wish you told me what kind of smartphone you have, but I guess it's worth talking about both. So if you're using iOS, GarageBand is the way to go. I would set up either a SoundCloud account or some, you know, podcast platform, but just use GarageBand to set it all up for you. Okay. And maybe you could, I'm not like 100% familiar with GarageBand, but that is for a completely free app. It's pretty fucking great. You know, like you're not going to get any argument from me on that. Also, the lightning connector or whatever the fuck, you know, iPhones are using now. But the connector on that, you know, really does allow for much. So here's the problem is that Android is Linux. And so you run into latency issues and so on when you're dealing with sound, especially recording sound. And when you're trying to do so through certain hardware. Now, the connector at the bottom of the iPhone gives you a lot of options, and I mean a lot of options of what kind of, I mean, you can hook up full-fledged studios to that damn thing if you wanted to go that far, and I'm not kidding. But you can get some external, there's the company that sells like the iRig and so on, and I think it's IK Multimedia, I think is the name of the company. They sell a lot of like external microphones and hardware that you can connect to your iPhone if you're using an iPhone. If you're using Android, I have, in fact, like on the Sovryn Tech Amazon wish list, okay, sovereigntech.wishlist or wishlist.sovereigntech.com. On there in the past, I have had various like equipment, podcast equipment that's designed to connect to an Android phone that I've tried out. And honestly, none of it sounds better than the built-in, you know, microphone into the phone. Okay. Like I don't really see the advantage. So with iOS, I think you could take advantage of some external hardware. With Android, not so much. Now, that covers the hardware. Okay. And I mean, really with iOS, like the sky's the limit. I mean, you could get stuff from like Samsung, you know, like they have Zoom models, which my mobile setup is not through my smartphone. I have a Zoom H6, and that's just, I mean, that is literally a studio in your hand. I mean, it in every sense of the word. It's pretty impressive. It even has XLR connectors and everything if you wanted to go that far. I've yet to need to. I do have a nice shotgun mic for it and so on, but that's usually my mobile setup. Okay, but you can hook up a lot of that stuff right to your iPhone and then rock GarageBand and away you go. You know, so that's a great setup if you want to do that. Now, as far as software, this is where things get interesting. Again, with iPhone, it's pretty basic. You use GarageBand. Something you could also do with iPhone, but might be the best bet for Android, it's relatively new. I think it came out a couple years ago, but they updated pretty hardcore in this year, in 2018. And it's called Anchor, A-N-C-H-O-R, not like A-N-K-E-R, like the company that sells batteries. It's called Anchor, and this gets really interesting. So what it will do is Anchor, you install the app. I think it's like a freemium thing. Like there's a free version that you can use that can take you such and so far, but then you can pay for more of it. But it does some really interesting stuff. One is that it will distribute it on all the popular podcast platforms. You know, like it'll create an RSS feed and put it out on iTunes and Google Play Music and Stitcher and all that. As far as I know, like it'll just put it all out there. The other interesting thing with that, so it will give you a podcast. It'll give you a podcast feed, a podcast list, and it will store all that stuff, all of those podcasts for you. It looks like it works much better for a shorter podcast, but if that's what you're doing, hey, great, you know. And this could be really interesting for like a 5-minute podcast, like a daily 5-minute podcast. That could be pretty great, unless it's a really fucking amazing podcast that you're doing. And if it's only 5 minutes, if it's only 5 minutes and it's really, really amazing, like super information dense, I think you could get away with a shorter podcast once a week like that. But otherwise, you kind of want to do daily just to make it worthwhile for people. And for fuck's sake, it's only 5 minutes. But regardless, the other interesting thing, if you wanted to go a little longer, or if you wanted to go a lot longer, I don't know that Anchor necessarily has a limit. I haven't used it that much. But it allows for anyone that has the Anchor app installed on their phone to call into your show, and I think it allows them to listen live. I mean, that's and you're doing it, you're transmitting from your phone. They're just listening and potentially calling into you, and you're transmitting from it. I mean, that's pretty cool if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into, like interacting with your audience, and so on. And that comes with certain advantages, and it comes with certain challenges, quite frankly. So, Anchor, again, A-N-C-H-O-R, I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to check out more about it, but that might be the best way to go. In fact, honestly, depending upon how serious you really do want to get, like if you didn't need the music and the sound effects and all that other stuff, I think that could get a lot more interesting if you're using Anchor. Anchor does let you upload files as well, like sound files. So maybe you could do a mixture of the two where you're using Anchor and GarageBand, say with iOS. But with Android, I think this is really the way to go. SoundCloud would let you do it too, where you can upload sounds, or you can record sounds with the SoundCloud app, and then we'll automatically put it on your SoundCloud channel. That's a possibility. But Anchor, I mean, the problem is that a thing like Anchor could just shut down at some point. So it depends on how serious you want to be about this. I mean, to some degree, let's be clear here. You're doing it on your smartphone. How serious are you? Not to say that smartphones, like they're built-in microphones and everything. I've heard, I know of podcasts that have massive, 6 to 7 digit audiences. And a lot of times they record interviews right on their smartphone. And nobody complains. They're just like, okay, yep, there was that great interview, and they move on, and it sounds pretty good. Like it sounds damn good. So, you can do it, but just keep that in perspective. So I don't know that I'd recommend doing a podcast on a smartphone, but if you want to give it a shot, well, there's my suggestions for you. Anyway, we'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. Woo! Hey, I know what you're thinking. Wow, this is a great fucking show. And you know what? I agree with you. And I'm not just saying it because I'm the host. Woo! But I am the podcast champion, baby. And let me tell you, if you want to help out the podcast champion, you want to help out the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, and you want to make Sovryn Tech an even bigger show, here's how you do it. And don't worry, it's not for free, and you get something out of it. You go to Patreon. You go to patreon.com/SovrynTech, SOVRYN Tech. Patreon.com/SovrynTech. Become a Sovryn Tech patron, and you will get access to literally thousands of hours of bonus content. There's new content every week. You get to be in the live Q&A Hangouts that we do every month. You get to access to the Wednesday Q&A. Do you like that important messages segment? We do one every single week, and it goes a good hour strong, if not longer if needed, depending on how many questions there are. That's only for patrons, and all you got to do is at least $1 a month. Some do significantly more, and I'm honored by that. But become a patron, support the show, help it grow. Patreon.com/SovrynTech. And I thank you to all the patrons already out there and all the ones to come. Patreon.com/SovrynTech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
HackSec.
It is time for HackSec, baby, and the day has come. The day that I was warned about since I was a teenager by the Adventist pastor that said, the mark of the beast will be in your right hand and it'll be upon your forehead. Right? Isn't that book out of the book of Revelation? Oh, give me a break. Don't worry, I'm an atheist, folks. I just got to get into the story from NPR. Thousands of Swedes are inserting microchips under their skin. I mean, I think that tells the whole goddamn story. This is from October 22nd, 2018. Pretty fresh. Let's start reading a bit here from Maddie Savage. Technology continues to get closer and closer to our bodies, from the phones in our pockets to the smartwatches on our wrists. Now, for some people, it's getting under their skin. In Sweden, a country rich with technological advancement, thousands have had microchips inserted into their hands. The chips are designed to speed up users' daily routines and make their lives more convenient, accessing their homes, offices, and gyms in as easy as swiping their hands against digital readers. They also can be used to store emergency contact details, social media profiles, e-tickets for events, and rail journeys within Sweden. Proponents of the tiny chips say they're safe and largely protected from hacking, but one scientist is raising privacy concerns around the kind of personal health data that might be stored on the devices. Boy, to quote a little more of the Bible, there's always that one voice crying from the wilderness, right? Boy, I feel you, whoever you are, one scientist in Sweden. I know what you mean, because I feel that way all the time. Reading on. Around the size of a grain of rice. That won't feel weird under the skin. The chips typically are inserted into the skin just above each user's thumb, using a syringe similar to that used for giving vaccinations. The procedure costs about $180. So many Swedes are lining up to get the microchips that the country's main chipping company says it can't keep up with the number of requests. So, stallion break in here for a second. Let's be perfectly clear on this. A lot of people want this. This is not just like some fad, or where parents are just tracking their kids by installing some bullshit on them in Florida. I don't know. But this is something that a lot of people in Sweden seem to want. Okay, let's read on. More than 4,000 Swedes have adopted the technology, with one company, Biohacks International, dominating the market. The chipping firm was started 5 years ago by Johan Osterlund, a former professional body piercer. Well, it's interesting. Bit of a career change. Not so much. After spending the past 2 years working full-time on the project, he is currently developing training materials so he can hire Swedish doctors and nurses to help take on some of his heavy workload. Quote, having different cards and tokens verifying your identity to a bunch of different systems just doesn't make sense. Using a chip means that the hyper-connected surroundings that you live in every day can be streamlined, end quote, he says. Many early adopters come from Stockholm's, that's ironic, thriving startup scene syndrome. Eric Frisk, a 30-year-old web developer and designer, says he was really curious about the technology as soon as he heard about it and decided to get his own chip in 2014. Quote, it's just completely passive. It has no energy source or anything. So when you tap it against a reader, the chip sends back an ID that tells the reader which chip it is. End quote, he explains. Quote, Swedes are very pragmatic and the chip is useful. And since a lot of people know each other in the tech community, it's very tight. The trend has been spreading and people have seen the benefits, end quote, Frisk says. When Frisk moved into a shared house earlier this year, he organized a chipping party. Shit. Stallion breaking in. Man, I remember we used to have key parties where we gave a shit about our privacy. And maybe had sex or no, I'm sorry, wrong key party. No, the key party where we cared about our privacy and like we would share PGP keys and make sure that it was us. But then all that we knew of each other was a PGP key. We didn't have something with fucking RFID on it in our hand. They would transmit it to whoever, was willing to take it or capable. How the world has changed. Now, they can access the 16th century building they share in Stockholm's Old Town by tapping their hands on a digital reader by the door. Oh, I mean, you can't just like take out a key. And I mean, that's just too fucking hard. That is too hard. You know what? I'm going to stop for a second. As me, I mean, I'm 37, but technically I'm a millennial. I get, actually, I like to think of myself as a zennial. That's a whole other thing. I get really sick and tired, because I like young people. I really do. No, I'm not kidding. I mean, I can say damn kids all the time and that people have no taste or whatever. It's actually like, you know, if I'm to be honest, you know, it's the fucking industry that has no taste, right? But regardless, okay, I actually like younger people. I dig their shit. Like, and you know, I like their passion. Okay, and I think the millennials are going to, in many ways, change the world. It's pretty amazing. But with this, now I'm starting to wonder. Because now it's like, oh, you know, every time you hear this, oh, kids today, oh, they're so fucking lazy. Oh, they can't do shit. Oh, they're this and that. Well, I'll say, you know what? You're right. Because the ultimate laziness has finally come here. I mean, you still have to lift your hand to put your thumb up to the fucking reader. You can't carry a key to your fucking house to get into your fucking house, you know, and you're willing to risk like your data and getting tracked and whatever else. I mean, because look, all the people have to do is put various readers that just detect, you know, what this little grain of rice in your thumb is popping out. It's all it takes to just keep an eye on you wherever you go. And you say, well, everything's keep an eye on you. Well, you don't have to make it easy for them. Locks are, oh, I don't want to get into that conversation. Locks are for honest people anyway. But regardless of this, yep, they're lazy. No, I'm sorry. I apologize for defending the millennials. You're absolutely right. They're fucking lazy. I can't believe this. Like they literally cannot carry around an extra card to access the railway. They cannot carry around a key. They can't do any of that. Yep. A lot of them, obviously I'm not talking about all, because I do know some millennials, younger people, who are very, very privacy conscious. Like they are harder core perhaps even than me. And Satan bless them. And I mean that. From the bottom of my triple black heart. Reading on. Quote, the chip basically solves my problems, says Sylvia Versaghi, 28. Who uses it to get into her co-working space. What problem, Sylvia? Or Sylvia, sorry. No, it's Sylvia. What problem, Sylvia, did this solve for you about getting into your co-working space? And she uses it to share her LinkedIn details. Oh. And networking events, avoiding the need to spell out her name. Well, that can get complicated. Gotta agree with you there, but well, anyway, she simply touches another attendee's smartphone and the information is transferred. Quote, when another phone reads the chip, they see the link and they can open it in their phone browser. Good luck getting them to do that. You actually didn't make anything any simpler. It's probably just as easy for them to type that in as it would be to click the link to type in your name. Sweden, anyway, regardless, Sweden's largest train company has started allowing commuters to use chips instead of tickets, and there's talk that the chips could soon be used to make payments in shops and restaurants. Wow. I mean, look, folks, I'm an atheist, but what a lot of people see is like the mark of the beast out of the book of Revelation in the New Testament. Now, always understand, it doesn't say that there'd be a one world government. It says there'd be a one world economy. This smacks pretty hard of that. Now, I think that people are generally interpreting that wrong, but based on that common misinterpretation, I think, of the book of Revelation, you got something here. Let's see. I see no problem for it becoming mainstream. I think it's something that can seriously make people's lives better, end quote, Versaghi says. Osterlund believes there are two key reasons microchips have taken off in Sweden. First, the country has a long history of embracing new technologies before many others and is quickly moving toward becoming a cashless society. In the 1990s, the Swedish government invested in providing fast internet services for its citizens and gave tax breaks to companies that provided their workers with home computers. And well-known tech names such as Skype and Spotify have Swedish roots. Quote, the more you hear about technology, the more you learn about technology. The less apprehensive you get about technology. You know, he continues on with that whole train of thought. Osterlund says, only 1 in 4 people living in Sweden uses cash at least once a week. And according to the country's central bank, the Riksbank, the proportion of retail cash transactions has dropped from around 40% in 2010 to about 15% today. Osterlund's second theory is that the Swedes are less concerned about data privacy than people in other countries thanks to a high level of trust for Swedish companies, banks, large organizations, and government institutions. People of Sweden, and I know I have listeners there, I am so sorry that you feel you can trust that shit. I am so sorry. I mean, do you really? I think whenever you put trust in any kind of major, sizable institution, which any bank, even in a country like Sweden or government or whatever would be, you are, in a way, saying to yourself that you don't trust yourself. Now, there's something to be said for that, in our modern world, we need specialists and all that, and one person can't know everything and can't do everything, blah, blah, blah. I completely understand. I get that. But the further away from the source, and you as the individual are the measure of all things, and thus the source, and the bigger it gets, the further away it is from the source, the worse off it will eventually become for you. I don't know how many more, you can say, well, we're not that concerned about privacy because we trust our banks and we trust this. Great. Even if you did, how many more data leaks, how many more Equifax situations, how many more, you have, blockchains running wild in the tech world, right? Partly because it solves a lot of issues of security. Okay. That's not what's being implemented here, and that's not what the Swedes are talking about, is like trying to implement security. But this is pointing at it, is that like a lot of blockchain, ideas are about giving the user back control of their data. This is not giving you back control of your data at all. It's just not. This is, for lack of a better term, this is whoring your data around. You understand? I'm sorry you trust these people. Reading on. Swedes are used to sharing personal information, with many online purchases and administrative bodies requiring their social security numbers. Mobile phone numbers are widely available in online search databases, and people can easily look up each other's salaries by calling the tax authority. Osterlund says personal microchips are actually more difficult to hack than many other data sources because they are stored beneath the skin. Okay. Everything is hackable, he says, but the reason to hack them will never be bigger because it's a microchip. It's harder for someone to get to since you put it in you, he says. There are a few vocal critics of Sweden's microchip trend, and there is currently no national legislation regulating the growing industry. However, Ben Liberton, a British scientist based in southern Sweden, is among those starting to campaign for lawmakers to keep a closer eye on developments. Quote, what is happening now is relatively safe, but if it's used everywhere, if every time you want to do something and instead of using a card, you use your chip, it could be very, very easy to let go of personal information, end quote, he says, which is exactly the point that I was saying to you, was that, the further away from the source and the bigger it gets as it's further away from the source, the less control you actually have. Reading on, Liberton, a trained microbiologist now working in science communication, says one of his main concerns is how the chips could be used to share data about our physical health and bodily functions. Quote, because it's implanted in your body, when more health-related information starts being used and incorporated into the chip and being transmitted, that could create an extra layer of privacy that we really need to look at and take care of before it's widely used, end quote, he says. Despite these concerns, there seems to be no let-up in the trend. Anyway, we can stop there, with that. But just to break this down. Now, this is where a lot of these arguments eventually go. Eventually, I don't know if there's a rule for it. I forget what the rule is about Nazis, is that effectively every argument eventually gets down to the Nazis. And of course, the argument then is that when you bring up the Nazis, you lose. I think it's very similar with insurance companies. Okay. I think there are absolutely 100% fucking valid times to mention Nazi Germany, to mention the Nazis. Like when you are concerned about what tech giants or IBM would do with your data, including with this kind of situation, it is completely valid to bring up Diamog, which was, a technology like punch card style stuff, but a computer technology that IBM provided to the Nazis. Okay, there's a great book by Edwin Black called IBM and the Holocaust. I suggest you read it. Okay, that talks about how that's really how Nazi Germany was able to round up the Jews so well, because all that information was available, and it was just on punch cards. How easier would it be when it's a fucking microchip that anybody can read at just about any second? So I think it's completely valid to bring that up. But now the other one that people bring up, which I also actually think is valid, and now we know is valid. We've talked about it just in this year on Sovereign Tech, okay, like in Canada, where your health data is being collected by Fitbits and so on. Particularly there's a health insurance company out of Canada, another place where apparently they trust their government. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I've talked to some Canadians that don't trust their fucking government at all. Damn right. Okay. But regardless, where that data is being used either as a benefit for now or as how much you actually have to put up front, what's your premium and so on, as far as with health insurance. This is an argument that's been brought up for a while, is that all this data could eventually get to where like, you know, YouTube, like there's that classic YouTube video, okay, or classic video online, it's not just on YouTube, where the person's trying to order a pizza, but then like all of this information about him that's been collected starts going in, and effectively because of his health and all these other things, he can't order a pizza, and it gets down to the point where like they pretty much say, okay, we could sell you a salad, we can't sell you a pizza, otherwise your insurance premium, like if you really want the pizza, it's going to cost you $2,000 because we have to cover the health insurance for this. You know what I mean? Like, and people say, well, when you go that far, like that's comparative almost to the Nazis, and that's where you're going to lose. Okay, if you have to bring up that the concern is that, well, what are the insurance companies going to do with this data? And when it's completely pervasive, like Littleton was, or Liberton or whatever his name is, was bringing up. And that's the thing, is that it will just exponentially grow, you know, to where it's used more. But then that creates a complete picture, and a picture that you don't want. Okay? Because then they know they, them, those, you know, whatever. If it's the insurance companies, if it's the government ready to round up a certain group, whatever the fuck it is, they have this perfect picture. And yes, you can be in this picture on this gigantic 8K fucking screen that governments and insurance companies and all the corporatists, bullshitters have of you. Be one of the dead pixels, okay? And don't get this shit put in you. I can't believe this is popular. No, you know what? I can't.
The most incredible television event ever as you join the crew of Battlestar Galactica.
Right here, you creepy crawly. I have led the entire human race to ruin.
The last of mankind, fighting for life in a hostile galaxy.
Most of us are dead.
Alone, with only one hope, Battlestar Galactica and her crew.
There is no other destination.
Commander Adama, Captain Apollo, the intrepid Starbuck, and the dazzling Athena, searching for a new and peaceful world.
May as well live for today. We might not have many left. Let the attack begin.
A new age of high adventure, Battlestar Galactica.
This week's online review.
It is time for this week's online review, a segment that so many people are enjoying, a new segment that won't be going away when we do the 1 hour shift. This is one of the segments that we definitely will keep, along with HackSec, of course, and some others. But anyway, this week I want to do something. I want to read a review for you that's actually, believe it or not, this is the review that got me so hooked on reading reviews on sites like Amazon and so on, where I remember where I was at a tech company when I was working at a tech company when I read this, and I read it and I just fell over. I couldn't handle it. It was so great. And honestly, when I read the review, I just had to get my hands on what the review was about. And so this is something a little different than what we've usually done in the past couple of this week's online reviews. This is actually for an album, for music. And it has to do with a band that's just, easily in my top 5. I don't think that's unfair to say. Hell, I have a scarf, like a literal winter scarf of these guys. I have a wristband that I wear by them often, amongst other things. And we are talking about none other than perhaps the band most done for Album of the Week throughout Sovereign Tech's history, which is an old segment that we used to do, now we do on Patreon, but none other than DragonForce. Woo! Herman Lee and the boys. Unbelievable. And this is a review from 2006 for what I think was their third album, which is Inhuman Rampage. You had Valley of the Damned, which is their first album. Then you had Sonic Firestorm to follow that up. And then you had really what is their breakout album, even though I think the two previous albums are even better than this one. But their breakout album, at least in the United States, that being Inhuman Rampage. And this review is what hooked me. This is what made me say, you know what, I got to find out what the hell this is all about. And, of course, Inhuman Rampage became a big deal because it was like the last, Through the Fire and the Flames, the first song on the album, was like the end boss or end level, as it were, for Guitar Hero. Or maybe it was like Guitar Hero 3 or whatever, back in the day when Guitar Hero was actually a popular thing. And if you listen to the song and you listen to DragonForce, you can see why that would be considered the hardest thing you could possibly do with a guitar. But enough of that, because if you don't believe me, If you don't believe me that they are just one of the greatest bands ever, this is a 5-star review, you understand, from an Amazon customer. And they actually bought the fucking CD. Can you believe that? Of course, we're talking 2006. But here we go, from an Amazon customer. The title is, again, 5-star review. If you can't trust the people on Amazon, who can you trust? A strong contender for the best album of all time. Can you get enough of that? What does this person have to say? Believe the hype. I never hype up bands, but I will hype up this band until the day I die. Every good review about this band, specifically this album, is 100% true. After hearing this album, you pick your head back up, put it on your shoulders, and then go ram your freaking body through a granite wall. This is probably the fastest album I've ever heard, other than Origin or something, and it amazes me how fast this band plays. And it's not just masturbating and seeing how fast they can play before the friction causes their flesh to burn. They actually make coherent leads, riffs, and melodies that somehow are understandable when going through your head about 5.6 million miles an hour. This album is so fast that my CD player caught on fire, and then later on, my cat did, because he realized that he will never be as cool as this album. His cat caught on fire. Let me read on. I feel very, very bad for my other music. I'll never play it again. DragonForce has indeed ruined every CD ever, past, present, and future. Actually, I feel bad for every item I own, even my house. My house sucks compared to this CD. Their next release might beat it, but I think the world might end then, because if this CD is already God, then what is the next CD going to be? By the way, it's obvious that I'm exaggerating, but I am not being sarcastic. This is seriously one of the greatest metal albums ever, or album in general. If you don't like this, then you have no soul. I'm so sorry. Just get this album. Tracks 1 through 7 are in-your-face fast attacks, that the last track being a pretty ballad because features slower but no less spectacular guitar playing. DragonForce, I love you. Not in a gay way. Oh, I'm not done yet. Keep reading, woman. Yes, you may hate power metal, but you won't care when you hear this. The vocals are not over the top like most power metal bands. The singer sings at just the right pitch with very few actual falsetto yells. He sounds like the Journey singer more than he does an opera singer. Oh, and the drums are insanely insane too. The lyrics are deeply rooted in fantasy-based elements, but somehow they take these corny subjects and make them moving and emotional with the vocals, and crushingly awesome with the instruments. If I had a girlfriend, she would break up with me because I would be like, sorry, baby butt cakes, but we can't make love. I'm listening to DragonForce. She would reply, freak, but I don't care. I got this album. And if you would like to get Inhuman Rampage by DragonForce, an absolute classic, and I couldn't agree more with this review, link is in the show notes. Please check it out. And anyway, we'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. And go listen to DragonForce. And I feel bad for your house, too. Woo! Hey, baby, I know. You are tired of Gmail. You have had enough. Well, I have a solution for you. What I want you to do is you go to Fastmail, okay? It's fastmail.sovryn.to.com. That's the URL you can use. You're going to get a discount with that. You are going to love this. This is email for email's sake. This company does nothing more. Just email, and they do it right. All the latest security technologies. You want to log into your account with your YubiKey? You can do that. Fastmail has your hookup. Very inexpensive plans. I want you to check it out. You go to fastmail.sovryn.to.com. That'll get you the hookup, and it's an honor to have them as a part of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
The Climax.
Woo! All right. Well, time for a little bit of the climax, huh? Where I get to talk about whatever the hell I want to talk about. And this week I've got a movie review, and it's a movie that's been out for, well, a couple weeks now. Sometimes I do them right away because then I'll post them up on YouTube and hopefully get some, get some strike while the iron's hot, right? Have somebody do a search for a review and maybe they happen to end up on mine. Look at that transparency from me. Anyway. But other times I wait a little bit, and this is one that I actually waited a little bit even to see. But didn't wait too long, because this originally came out in the United States on November 21st, 2018, and the movie we're talking about is the latest entry in the Rocky franchise, the Rocky saga, there's so much about this I can't believe. But Creed 2, that's right, Creed 2, the sequel to Ryan Coogler's 2015 Creed, which was, in my opinion, the first Creed film, a great movie. I suppose I could kind of go down the list talking about the Rocky films in general, but I think that'll come up as we go down, as we start talking about this movie. And I do want to say, because I don't know that I did like a full review of the original Creed back in 2015, but I'm not going to give you a full review here. But basically, I mean, I really liked that movie. In fact, I liked it a lot. Like, I was so impressed. I know others have said this, and I concur with the assessment that it's probably the best passing of the torch movie ever. Okay, because really with the first Creed, you were setting up, okay, how do we continue this Rocky legacy, this franchise legacy? And Hollywood's all about franchises right now because they have no original ideas, so they just keep, and Creed 2 might point at some of this, but regardless. But what do we do? How do we keep this, wildly popular franchise going without having to do a remake? Now, I'll grant you that I would much rather have a passing of the torch like we have with the Creed films than a complete Rocky remake. That would be, honestly, that'd be insulting. I just don't believe. I'm sure someday it'll happen, right? And somebody's going to break out the joke from Spaceballs. It's like, now time for Rocky 5000, as in Rocky 5000, because there's that many of them, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. We're getting in that direction because I think Creed 2 might have set up some future franchises, quite frankly, but we'll get into that. But I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine someone else playing Rocky besides Sylvester Stallone. Like, it's just not possible. And I mean that, here's the thing. So I think the only other role I could imagine where I would say that would maybe be like Captain Kirk or maybe like, Captain Picard or something, where I can't imagine anyone else but William Shatner playing that. But that's not true. In fact, ever since I was a kid, I knew someone would eventually have to play Captain Kirk that was younger. Like, I just knew it because I remember when I was younger, I guess this might even be before I was in the double digits, they released, Michael and Denise Okuda released that great Star Trek reference guide called the Star Trek Chronology. This was even before the encyclopedia, if I remember correctly. But I used to read through that thing all the time. And in that, they talked about how Paramount was discussing a Starfleet Academy series, okay, and where it would be the younger years of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and so on. So even then, I knew sooner or later that, there's going to be someone younger playing these parts. It's not going to be, they weren't going to really pull off CGI. I mean, I had kind of the wherewithal to know that wouldn't happen then. It'd be even tough now. They could do it, but it'd still be tough now. So, there's lots, and same with Picard. Like, yeah, I imagine, I already figured this when he was old, or he looked old, I should say. When Patrick Stewart looked old in 87, he's the fountain of youth, certainly at that age, from that point on. But when he looked that age in 87, I always kind of expected, okay, we're going to get a younger Picard. Hell, in that season 6 episode, with the Nausicaans, you do see a younger person playing Picard. So it's not like there are very few roles where I can't imagine, where I can't imagine someone else taking over and playing the role in some kind of remake, reboot, whatever fucking term you want to use. Even Wolverine, like Hugh Jackman is totally Wolverine. But here's the thing, is that with Wolverine, I learned, there's no way that, I don't even know who you could get to play Wolverine on the screen. I remember thinking that in the 90s when they said there was going to be an X-Men movie. Then you see the X-Men movie and you go, holy shit, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, So I can accept someone else playing Wolverine. I really cannot picture any character where I couldn't possibly imagine someone else playing that, where I can't, where it's not possible for me to imagine someone else playing. I generally can, but Rocky, No, that's one where, guess what? Only Sylvester Stallone. And frankly, as far as Apollo Creed goes, who's, of course, the father of Adonis Creed, who, spoiler alerts, dies in Rocky IV. That's a major part of this film. Like, I can't picture anybody besides Carl Weathers playing that part, you know? It's just not going to happen. It's one of those very rare cases where I think there is absolutely, literally no one who could fill in those shoes, who could lace up those boots and put on those gloves besides Sylvester Stallone. It can't be done. Now, in the future, are they going to want to try and do a CGI Sly Stallone? Sure, go ahead. You know, I mean, they've already done it with Arnold in a million of his movies. I mean, like, by all means, go for it. Okay? Well, okay, not by all means. I actually do have some concerns around not having the actual actor involved. Like, if it's after their death, I have concerns about this, but I will, you know, that's another conversation for another time. Regardless, you know, this is the direction to go, is what I'm saying here, is that with the Creed films, okay, let's have it be part of the Rocky saga. Let's have it be a continuation. But let's not do the remake, you know, let's not do the reinterpretation or anything like that. Let's just keep building on it. And the 2015 Creed film did a phenomenal job of that. But again, like I said, maybe the best ever as far as passing on the torch. Certainly has done a better job than Star Wars has as far as, you know, passing on the torch from the big three. It's done a better job than just about anybody. The next generation of Star Trek wasn't really a passing on of the torch traditionally, other than, you know, in Encounter at Farpoint, you did have Dr. McCoy, but that was very well done, but that's also TV. Anyway, that's besides the point. So, yeah, I loved the first Creed film, you know, Rocky's battle with cancer and so on, and kind of the whole storyline around how is there an Adonis Creed, though it is kind of odd, and I don't recall if in the first Creed if they brought anything up about this, but you do see in previous Rocky films that Creed has like a son and a daughter already, neither of which are clear. I mean, they don't fit in with the timeline that it's Adonis Creed. Who knows where the fuck they are, but that's besides the point. Okay, we can nitpick all that kind of stuff all you want, but these are the Rocky films, and there are just some things you let go of, like in Rocky 2, right? In Rocky 2, what's one of Rocky's biggest challenges? Not Apollo Creed. One of his biggest challenges is he can barely read the script to do commercials. Okay. And he's trying to make money to do these like deodorant commercials and other things. And like, he just can't do them. But then you see him in the beginning of Rocky 3, and holy shit, he's on the Muppet Show, and he's like doing credit card commercials, no problem, and all that. I mean, maybe that's a way of saying that Rocky suddenly has like this newfound confidence because he's champion or something like that. But regardless, it is kind of odd, right? So, I mean, you accept these sorts of things with Rocky. The other weird one, just quick while we're talking about things that don't exactly like fit in with, you know, that are inconsistent, right? That are a contradiction with what's been laid before. The difference between Rocky's son in Rocky 4 and then in Rocky 5, which is only like 6 months later, if that, I think, with Rocky 5, because it takes place right after Rocky 4, right? And Rocky's in the shower and everything after the fight. Somehow his son looks like twice as old as he did in Rocky 4, and he's got an earring and all. I mean, what the fuck? So, I mean, I get it. I get why it happened, but I mean, these are just things that you accept, okay? And you generally don't ask questions with this sort of thing, and that's okay. So, you know, I think I do want to describe a little bit more about the Rocky films because I think it's appertinent to what I'm going to say about Creed 2. But bottom line is Creed 1 was great, so expectations for Creed 2 were admittedly high. Certainly on my part, they were quite high. The Rocky movies in general are some of my favorites of all time for a few reasons. And actually, I'm going to give you a little bit of history on this. Then, like I said, we will get into what I think about Creed 2. There is a lot to say. In fact, there are things in it that, like I said, I just never thought that I would ever see again in my life. And it's pretty incredible that happens, but hold on for it. So the Rocky movies, of course, you know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then there's Rocky Balboa, which I usually just call Rocky 6. And then we end up with Creed and now Creed 2. Those are effectively, you know, the Rocky movies. Okay. Me personally, I started with Rocky 3. Like when I was younger, I watched Rocky. That was the first Rocky movie that I ever saw. And then I saw Rocky 4. Now, the amazing thing with the Rocky films, and the Creed films don't do it so much, and it's a little disappointing that it doesn't exactly happen, even though they kind of try to do it in this one, but it doesn't totally work. one of the cool things about the Rocky movies is that each one, you actually can watch them self-contained. And I've proven this. I've shown people who've never seen Rocky movies before, even though Rocky is such a part of our pop culture, that you can, you can kind of fill in the blanks easy enough. I have tested this, and yeah, people can watch any of the Rocky films and they just pick it up and they run with it. But what's impressive is that the Rocky movies are, like, as much as they can be self-contained because they're self-referential to everything that happened in previous films. Either it's because the movie opens up with a condensed version, an abridged version of the fight from before, so you know where you're picking up from, or from the end fight from the previous film, or there's a flashback scene, where, like in Rocky IV, where Rocky's listening to Robert Tepper's No Easy Way Out, and he's driving around and he's seeing like all the stuff that how he met Adrian, how he met Apollo, and all this different shit after Apollo has died in Rocky IV, right? I mean, that happens in just about every film. You get that nice history lesson, which is really cool. Now you have to understand, me as a kid, when I watched 3 and 4 first, and you see scenes from 1 and 2 in 3 and 4, and then, I would eventually see 5, but it would take forever. It wasn't until I bought the actual, like when I was a teenager, and for the first time, I bought like the entire VHS set with 1 through 5 in it, back in the mid-90s. It wasn't until I did that I actually saw 1 and 2. And you know what? When I watched 1 and 2, do you know what I thought about those? You understand, like, I am seeing scenes from these in some of my favorite movies of all time. And Rocky 3 and 4 certainly are. Rocky 3 is my favorite Rocky movie, for those that are wondering. Okay, just, wow. I can't tell you how much these movies mean to me, how much I love them. When I first, I see these scenes from 1 and 2, and I think, oh, there's these earlier Rocky movies, and I think of them like they're lost books of the Bible or something. Like this is the holy scripture that's about to get laid on me. And I can't wait to watch them. And I watch 1 and 2, and honestly, they're boring. I know that's going to sound crazy. Like, I can appreciate them a little more now because I've come to love 70s film, as to where before I kind of hated it. And Rocky 2 I didn't think was as boring as 1. But they didn't hold up. And part of that is, okay, and there needs to be a conversation around this. I think the reason for that is that 1 and 2 kind of follows the formula that 3, 4, and 5, well, 3 and 4 anyway, and 3, 4, 6, and Creed, if you want to call that Rocky 7, but that Creed and Creed 2 all kind of follow. They have a set formula where there's a losing fight. There's 2 main fights in it. You have a losing fight, and then you have like a couple of training sequences, usually a training sequence where the fighter, be it Rocky, whatever, is kind of out of it. And then there's a training sequence when they get their confidence back or something like that. And they're ready to kick some ass. And then you end up with a second fight where whatever's supposed to happen happens. It doesn't necessarily mean the person's going to win, right? Think Rocky Balboa or the very first Rocky film and so on. But that's kind of the formula. Rocky 1 doesn't have that at all. The other thing that Rocky 1 didn't have that 2 and up would end up having is the boxing sequence, the end boxing match in Rocky 1 is very realistic, and they don't have the thunder sound effect behind the punches where it's like poof, poof. You just hear the that an actual boxing glove would make, that sound. So like that, I think that made it kind of boring for me. But Rocky 3 and 4, and I'm not the first person to say this, ironically, so I'm a big fan of James over at the Angry Video Game Nerd, and he loves the Rocky movies. He pretty much says it's his favorite franchise, and his favorite is 1, and I think 1 and then maybe 2, and then he kind of goes down from there, which I can't believe that those are his favorite. But he makes a great point, and I agree with him, is that Rocky 3 and certainly Rocky 4, they're effectively, there were superhero movies before then, great ones, in fact, consider, 78 Superman. But these are the first comic book movies. These are the first superhero movies. They're not based on comic books, but they follow the path of the comic book in a very real way, where you do have, the hero is at the top of his game, hero loses, Hero is, questions his ability to defeat the villain. Hero regains his ability through some kind of special training, finding, some master or something in certain movies, Apollo Creed or whoever, and then has the strength to take on the villain and then beats the villain. I mean, it's they are very much superhero films, Rocky 3 and 4. I mean, they really are, and credit to them, and credit to Stallone for fucking coming up with that formula, because he did it. You could say, well, no, it's actually all Joseph Campbell, blah, 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 Hero Without Space. But no, that's all Stallone. He figured out that formula, and he got it down to a science. I mean, he really, really did. So when you watch Rocky movies kind of without that formula, it doesn't feel right. It's not the same. And I think that's why Rocky 5 left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. Rocky 6 doesn't exactly follow the formula. It half follows it. But the beauty about Rocky 6, or Rocky Balboa, is, and it is widely critically acclaimed, the beauty of that movie, there is a realism that comes in, but they still kind of give you the blow-by-blow. You get the thunder punches and everything, okay? But there's like so many great moments with Rocky, and philosophical moments, quite frankly, that you just end up loving the film and it doesn't matter. And that philosophical Rocky, which kind of started in Rocky 4, you sort of get in 5, but comes to full fruition in 6, is what you've been getting through 7 and 8, or through Creed 1 and Creed 2. And it continues on into Creed 2. Okay, but there's very much a set formula, and when a Rocky movie doesn't follow it, like 1 and 2, I don't know, I look back on those, and like if I wanted to get somebody to start watching Rocky now, like if you've seen Creed and you're like, shit, I want to go back and watch the Rocky movies, I say start with 3. Start with 3 and work your way back up to Creed, and then if you're really loving it, and I think that'll make you fall in love with it, then go back and watch 1 and 2 and see where it all began. I in fact, after watching the Creed movies, I think going back and watching Rocky 1 and getting to learn about Apollo Creed, not Adonis Creed, the title character of the recent films, I think that's a winning combination there. That's a 1-2 punch, no pun intended. Now, for a lot of people, and I completely understand the statement, like I said, Rocky 3 is my personal favorite Rocky movie. I think there's so much great shit in that. It's actually helped me out in my life. I'm not going to go into that right now. You can ask about that if you want. Maybe I can get to it in an important messages segment, or, well, if there's going to be an important messages segment, or you can ask me on Patreon or something, and I can get to it in a Wednesday Q&A. But I just love Rocky 3. But I totally understand why so many people say their favorite Rocky movie is Rocky 4, where he takes on Ivan Drago, right? Dolph Lundgren's there. It's Russian versus the American, the whole thing. And it really is, I mean, it's an epic fucking film. Amazingly, only an hour and a half. And if you watch it with a more critical eye, it's an incredibly simplistic film. Incredibly simplistic. Does not have anywhere near the heart or really the moments, in my opinion, that even like Rocky 3 has. I mean, there's not as much meat on the bone in that. And honestly, there's not as much meat on the bones of Stallone and Lundgren in that. I mean, they are in top shape. I mean, I don't know what their body fat count is, but that percentage is, I mean, hell, is it like 0.5%? It's amazing. So, but I get why people love Rocky 4. Creed 2 is absolutely a sequel to Rocky 4. I mean, in every sense. And in fact, here's the thing. It's a little too much of a sequel, okay? And I say that meaning that it just, like, it feels like the same beats. It's too close. I mean, if you thought that Star Wars The Force Awakens was a copy of A New Hope, oh, you've got another thing coming when you watch Creed 2. I mean, it's Rocky 4, almost, pun intended, almost blow for blow. I mean, really, I'm half shocked. I was half expecting, spoiler alerts, folks. I was half expecting as soon as because what you get is you get the return of Ivan Drago, and you find out that Ivan Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren again, but you find out he has a son named Victor Drago, who's played by, I mean, just a massive dude, Florian Munteanu, I think is his name. And they want to take on like this promoter who's kind of playing up a Don King kind of thing. What is his name? Buddy Marcel or whatever. He wants to set up a fight between Creed, Adonis Creed, and the son of Ivan Drago. And Ivan Drago, of course, if you remember from Rocky 4, is the guy that killed Adonis Creed's dad in the ring. So you can see where this all kind of comes together, right? And sort of the main thrust of this film. I mean, it again, you're rehashing, and it's all stuff getting transferred down to the sons and everything. And certainly I could understand, arguments where like, wow, this movie's kind of poor because it's just like playing off the cycle of trauma and all that stuff. I get that. Okay. Let's treat it as the Rocky movie that it is, though. All right. This is popcorn fare and, all the way. It's not something that you take that seriously. But anyway, it opens up. Creed ends up winning the heavyweight championship. He is now the champion. He's the boxing whatever, the world. And he, then suddenly here comes Victor Drago, Ivan Drago's son, saying, I want a match. Of course, all getting set up by Buddy Marcel, but he wants a match, and he's going to take him on in America. And Rocky, is Adonis's trainer, and Rocky says, I'm not going to be a part of this. Victor and Ivan Drago come to America, which is a very interesting sequence where it's kind of a reversal of what happens in Rocky IV. Kind of. This is one of those moments where it's a little different. In fact, the relationship with Ivan Drago, the relationship between Ivan Drago and Victor Drago is one of the more enjoyable and interesting and unique aspects, I think, or rare aspects of this film that does not play off of things from previous Rocky films. In fact, if that element wasn't there, I probably would have hated this movie. So I haven't said whether or not I liked it yet either, but I might have just given a little bit away there. Okay, but there's an interesting point where they end up, Victor and Ivan come to America because they're going to get in this, Buddy Marcel setting up this fight between Adonis and Victor. And there's a point where Ivan goes to Adrian's, which is Rocky's restaurant that we find out about in Rocky VI, right, in Rocky Balboa. And because Adrian's dead, okay, and he names a restaurant after her. So he goes there, meets Rocky, and they talk. And I was half expecting, because his son also comes in, Victor comes into the restaurant later on. I was half expecting them to kill Rocky. I'm glad they didn't. Just because otherwise that would have been, again, it would have just been another beat where they were completely copying Rocky IV. And that would have put it over the edge, I think. So I'm glad that they didn't end up doing that. But to talk about, before we get into more of what goes on, I kind of gave you the hint of the story. I mean, if you've seen a Rocky movie, you've kind of seen them all. And really it all comes down to execution and really the remixing of ideas as to whether or not it gives you those, underdog feels. I guess I'll open, since I already started getting into whether I like the film, I wasn't the biggest fan of this. It wasn't bad. Like, it really wasn't bad. And I guess maybe it's better than Rocky V. I mean, Rocky V sucked if it didn't have the street fight. The street fight totally redeems that movie. And it's that good. Like that street fight sequence is phenomenal. In fact, I dare say that street fight sequence is better than the entire movie of Creed 2. But overall, this is not the worst Rocky movie. I don't know. I think I could watch Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 before I'd want to watch, certainly Rocky 2 before I'd want to watch this one. Here's what happens in this. You get like the training sequences, you get all the stuff, and it really just does finally feel like this is too close to what was done before. Even, where there's when they're training Adonis, because Rocky initially says he doesn't want to train him. He doesn't want to be in his corner for the fight against Victor Drago. And he doesn't. And Adonis goes and gets the son of his dad's trainer, Duke, okay, which I guess is Duke Jr., and he ends up training him. Of course, Adonis doesn't do well against Victor at first. And anyway, I won't give away everything about that. But regardless, they end up, when Rocky comes back and they decide to train and they're going to take on Victor again, they go like out to the desert somewhere, like Mexico or Arizona or some shit, and they do some kind of boxing thing there. I mean, it's the same thing where like they're trying to do old school boxing. Like there's no, and it's weird. It's just a fucking weird sequence because there's this boxing. It's in the open air. Like it's not even a gym there, but there's like this effectively this open air gym in Arizona where like old school boxers come back to get their Eye of the Tiger back and all this sort of thing. And like there's no punching bags. There's only like hanging tires that you can punch and all this stuff. And I'm just like, if everybody knows about this thing, like that place should be, if this is the place where the way that they describe it in Creed 2, if this is a place where, fighters come back to get their edge or something like that, there should be tons of people there, right? Like but there's almost no one there. And Adonis is training there. And it just feels very much like this idea, which was great in Rocky IV, where Rocky IV wants to, he's like, no, just put me out in a log cabin and I'm going to train really old school, like the real old fashioned way of strength training. No, barely any weights, none of the really high tech stuff like Ivan Drago would use in Rocky IV, that the Russians are putting on and everything. I want it to be really old school. So they're totally playing off that. Just instead of it being in the middle of winter, they put him in the middle of the desert. But it was the same fucking thing. And I don't know, the music, the soundtrack throughout all this, not to say that it was necessarily bad music. I'm not going to say that, but it just didn't work. I think the main score was done by Ludwig Göransson, which isn't bad, but I don't know, there's a lot of other music that's kind of put into it that I don't feel like it doesn't give me the intensity. It doesn't give me the, it's not Hearts on Fire, right? It's not Burning Heart. It's not Eye of the Tiger. Like, it's not those things that just get you pumped up. I mean, maybe I'm the wrong demographic for this. I'm totally open to that, but I don't think so. But the soundtrack just didn't pump me up like, say, the Rocky IV soundtrack would. Now, I'll grant you that the Rocky IV soundtrack is easily one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. It just is. Okay, and to this day, people will still listen to that soundtrack beginning to end, when they're working out in the gym or something like that. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that and how many times I've fucking done it myself. I've told people, I said, the cheapest way, if you want to, start putting on some muscle, the cheapest way to do it is don't buy another set of plates, okay, for your dumbbells or anything. Buy the Rocky IV soundtrack and just listen to that. You're going to put on 10% muscle mass just listening to it. I'm kind of kidding, but only kind of. So anyway, it's one of those points where, it feels like you get it. This is Rocky IV kind of all over again. And not, like I said, it is a direct sequel to it, right? Because here's Ivan Drago back. And this is one of the things that I can't believe that I was seeing again. That literally at the end of this film, you are once again seeing Sylvester Stallone and Dolph Lundgren in the ring. You are seeing Rocky and Ivan Drago in the ring again. They're not boxing. Would have been interesting. They're not, I mean, maybe not interesting. I don't know what I would think of it. But they're not boxing, but there they are in the ring again. I never in my life thought that I would ever see that again. That I would see a new scene where Ivan Drago and Rocky Balboa are in the ring. That's pretty incredible. Like, I have to give it some credit for that. But other than that, and like I said, the kind of the interplay between Victor and Ivan Drago and their mother, who Bridget Nielsen makes a return in this, which I couldn't believe either. I never thought I'd see her again in a movie. But anyway, other than that, like this movie just has no heart. I don't feel it has any heart. I don't feel it's inspiring. I think Adonis Creed's kind of like story and what he's going through, it falls flat. I'm not the biggest fan of Michael B. Jordan anyway. Like, I don't think he's that grand of an actor. In fact, originally, so the director, who I thought the director did fine. I blame the editing room more than anything. I don't know how much this director had involvement in that. But Stephen Caple Jr., who is one of Forbes 30 under 30. I mean, I don't know really anything that he's done, but apparently he has a great reputation. Now, the first Creed film was done by Ryan Coogler. Ryan Coogler has real panache. He has real style, and you can feel it. And I think that's part of the reason that Creed was so phenomenal, was because Ryan Coogler was involved. Now, Ryan Coogler would go on to do, and part of the reason he wasn't able to direct Creed 2 was because he was doing Black Panther. Now, Michael B. Jordan was in that as well. But I thought with that movie, Michael B. Jordan's part in that was one of the weakest parts of the film. And it just didn't feel right. I'm not getting it. Like, I like the guy, I guess, but I'm becoming more and more unimpressed with what Michael B. Jordan brings to any movie's table than the opposite. Then I'm impressed, or like, oh, well, he's in it. I'll feel confident about this. It's probably going to be a pretty great movie. I mean, I got to give him credit. Like, as far body wise, he looked amazing. He looked absolutely amazing. So did the guy playing Victor Drago. Okay. I'll give credit there. I don't have any problem with Stephen Caple Jr.'s, directing. I think that actually there were some interesting sequences where they're doing like almost like a first person kind of boxing where it looks like you're getting punched when you're watching the movie and everything. There were some very, very interesting cinematography choices in this that I'm not exactly sure whose idea those were, but it worked. And there was a nice mixture, kind of like with Rocky Balboa, where it felt very real, like you're actually watching boxing on HBO, but then at the same time, it also got to the point where it needed to be more of that comic book style boxing that we're used to from Rocky 3 and 4. So it delivered on that, sure. But again, this whole movie just feels like a rehash of Rocky 4, and it's just too close. I'm not saying every Rocky movie needs to be original. I dare say most of them aren't. But there just needed to be something else in this, and there wasn't. I mean, it kind of had Philosopher Rocky in it, right? But it wasn't enough, and it wasn't deep enough. And granted, how many great things can you say on film? I don't know, because like the shit that that Stallone says, or that Rocky says in Rocky 6 and Rocky Balboa, like those are some of the best speech. I love those when he's talking about happiness and all that. I mean, it's whether you agree with it or not, there's some inspiring stuff in that. I mean, you just get none of that, in my opinion, in this. Nothing really that inspiring at all. I don't know. Everything just seems to fall flat. Again, it's not bad. It's not great. It's not the first Creed. It really doesn't hold up as far as that goes. But an interesting thing does happen, especially in the last fight. And this is unique, I think, for the Rocky movies in general. Is I actually feel bad for the quote-unquote villain, like towards the end of the end fight. Not at the exact end. I think that's when everybody felt bad for him. But I felt bad for him towards the end of the end fight. There's a point where basically what you get is you get the storyline that after Rocky 4, after the events of Rocky 4, Ivan Drago is just like, he's shipped off to the Ukraine and he's an outcast. Okay. He's effectively an outcast of, the Russians don't want anything to do with him. He failed, right? Blah, blah, blah. But you find, his wife leaves him, but you find out he does end up having a son. He trains his son to be a boxer, and that's all he knows, and that's all he's got. And obviously it's to train for one day for them to get the revenge and maybe get the love back from their mother, who ends up marrying, it looks like she marries some kind of wealthy Russian guy. I don't know, whatever the hell he does. And it appears to start happening when he does so well against Adonis Creed the first time, and they're setting up for the second fight. It looks like the Dragos are getting kind of their name back, and they're getting respect and getting invited to dinners in Russia and all this business, and that's going on. But Ivan Drago is constantly chastising his son, saying, if you don't win, you need to get out. He should be knocked out by now. This is why your mother left us, blah, blah, blah. I mean, laying out this huge guilt trip and just passing down traumas. I mean, that's very true. That's exactly what's going on. But now during the second, so you get that, and that makes for some interesting things. And there's points where Victor's very mad about what's going on, and so on. And like he doesn't really care about his mother, but then, Ivan Drago does. Obviously it was his wife, and he's trying to get some kind of, he's trying to, I don't know, get recognition and rebuild, not his career, but just his reputation, I guess, in Russia. And it gets to the point, though, during the last fight between Adonis and Victor Drago ends up going so long, eventually, like, Victor's mother, Ivan's ex-wife, just is like, oh, he's going to lose, and she just leaves. And Victor sees it, and he's like, oh, what the hell? And you see him start to give up, and Adonis just totally takes advantage and starts beating the shit out of Victor Drago, which feels kind of like when it's happening, you're just like, oh shit, like, come on, Adonis, fucking leave it, let it go. You're winning, it's over. Like, I mean, you almost think of Adonis as the bad guy. Not that that's an unfair thing to set up in a Rocky movie, because of course Apollo Creed was originally the villain, right? Way back in Rocky 1 and even to some degree in Rocky 2. Then he becomes like the hero in 3 at least anyway. But then, the moment happens where Ivan Drago and Dolph Lundgren, hell of an actor, pulls it off, and he throws in the towel on the fight, which has incredible significance because, like how Rocky didn't throw in the towel in Rocky 4, and, Apollo Creed dies because of that. Not Adonis, Apollo Creed, his dad. And, and he's just saying to his son, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And there's even a sequence at the end where you see Victor Drago running, and then his father kind of comes up alongside him. As to where before his father was pushing him by driving in a car behind him to get him to run faster, then it's Victor running, or Ivan running with Victor, and you can sort of see that maybe they've reconciled or something. And look, if there's going to be a Creed 3, like I think there's going to be a Creed 3. I would love to get more of, where Victor Drago is like a friend of Adonis Creed. I think that would be amazing. Or where we make Drago films. And I'm serious, like, do that, because honestly, that whole interplay that emotion and the thrusts that were going on for the Dragos, for Ivan and Victor, was way more interesting than any of the shit that was going on for Creed or for Rocky. You know, it's not like Rocky wasn't going through cancer in this. Rocky was just kind of there. And it feels like they kind of set it up to where Rocky can be out of the, like, he can leave the franchise now, and now Creed can just be run by someone else, or the Rocky franchise can be run by someone else, which is fine. I'm not against that at all. I wish Ryan Coogler would come back, but regardless, I'm not against that happening. But yeah, give me Drago movies. I don't even want a Creed 3. Let's just go right to Drago. I want that story. I want to see their interplay. I want more Dolph Lundgren. I want, give me that. I think that would be really, really cool, because that was the only like really interesting and engaging thing in this film. And it's really the only thing that made me feel anything. You know, like when Adonis Creed in the first fight is getting his ass kicked by Victor, you know it's happening. And you know he's not going to die, but you knew what was going to happen. You knew he was going to get, pretty much beaten to where, close to death or something, which is exactly what goes down. And so, it came off as cheap and no feeling whatsoever. And again, the music, even though there was one point where they play a bit of the Rocky theme, Bill Conti's classic Gonna Fly Now Rocky theme, towards in the end fight, felt a little something there, but not nearly what I was feeling whenever they would deal with what's going on for the Dragos, what's going on for the Russians in this. And so I think sticking with Creed is that's a failure. Now, in this, Creed does have a daughter, does have a kid. You find out she's deaf as well, of course, because Tessa Thompson's character, Bianca, who ends up becoming his wife, whatever, she's deaf and all that. And it felt like they were trying to create some kind of like future drama that could happen from that. Maybe Adonis Creed's daughter will grow up one day, and in 20 years we're going to have Rocky movies about a deaf daughter. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or that it might not work. I'm just saying it felt like they were setting it up a little too much, as to where the direction that I think would be way more interesting for them to go, particularly with the Dragos, is probably the direction they're not going to go. But they did set up to where that could happen. Neither of them died or anything like that. Now that I think about it, I almost kind of wish all right, look, I don't want anybody to die in a movie or otherwise, don't misunderstand me. But maybe the movie would have had a little something extra if what I thought was going to happen, where the Dragos end up killing Rocky, or at least maybe Ivan does, maybe that would have given the movie a little something extra. Maybe that would have given it something to talk about. But right now, I know I've been talking about it for almost 40 minutes, but that's mainly because I was talking more about Rocky, setting you up for what we got here. And as much as it was copying Rocky IV, again, that delivery just didn't come off. It didn't have that great comic book style or that underdog style. You never feel like Creed's the underdog in this at all. Not even close. Even when Rocky was champion, you still felt like he was the underdog. You never felt like that with Creed, and I think that kind of hurts it, as to where you felt the Dragos are certainly the underdogs in this, of all things. This movie just had a few too many. It copied too much from Rocky IV, too much of the same beats, and a few too many missteps, and not enough heart. There just was not enough heart. So if I'm going to give it a score out of 10, maybe I'll give it a 6. I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. I didn't feel it. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because I fucking love the Rocky movies. I can watch Rocky 5 again. I mean, now I love them all. I know I said 1 and 2 were boring to me at first, but now I love them. I love all these movies. Creed was a fucking great movie. I could watch that over and over again. Got the Blu-ray right there. I'm looking at it. But what the fuck? Creed 2 just, it didn't, there wasn't enough differentiating it. There were some differentiators, but they're differentiators that they're probably going to drop, which is a shame, because like I said, I want those Dragos movies. Anyway, that's it for the review of that movie. I really can't believe I'm saying that. It's not a bad film. It's just not great, and it doesn't even necessarily have great moments. And it had moments that made me feel, but they weren't like great moments. It should have had inspiring, great moments. That's what you go to see a Rocky movie for fuck's sake. It's to, you should be walking out of there like, fuck yeah, baby, I'm taking on the world. That's what should be happening, and that didn't happen with this. And I'm disappointed. Not a bad movie, go see it. It's enjoyable in ways, and if you're a Rocky fan, you have to see it. But otherwise, it just wasn't enough. I can't picture. I'll probably watch it again at some point, and get the Blu-ray, but otherwise I can't picture ever watching this again. As to where the other Rocky movies, I've watched them so many times I completely lost count. So anyway, that's it for this episode of Sovryn Tech. Don't forget that next week we are going to be we're going to cut down. We'll see how this works out. We're going to be cutting down to an hour. Okay, the show will have a hard 1 hour limit. So be prepared for that. Don't think you're missing something in your audio or you're missing half the episode. That's just how it is. But if you want more content from me, you got to become a patron. Go to sovryntech.com. Okay, that's all you got to do. You can sign up. You get access to thousands of hours. And there's new hours, new episodes every fucking week, almost every day coming out on Patreon. So check that out. And I will see all of you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.